Hey guys, welcome back to the third episode of Wrench Tales with yours truly, Brandon Steckler, technical editor of Motor Age magazine. And I am here today with my good friend Jason LaBonte of Legendary Automotive and Truck Service in Fort Myers, Florida. Dude, how you doing today?
Fantastic, man. Thanks for reaching out.
Hey, yo, listen, I'm really happy you took time out of your night to. I know you got the kids and stuff like that, but you told me a story last week about this possessed Ford truck you're working on. And I said, you got to tell this story for me. I mean, you really do. Jason has got this seemingly possessed 2010 for what was it, an Explorer, Ford Explorer,
Yeah,
right?
2010 Explorer Sport Track, the little pickup.
Oh my goodness gracious. And this thing was when he called me and said, this thing's acting up and it's doing what it's doing, but he knows how to fix it. All he's got to do is, put his elbow on the horn pad and lean on it. And as long as he's holding the horn down, everything seems to work. There's a problem with that. He pissed off everybody in the shop, for
Yeah.
starters.
Yes, I
I
did.
can imagine. But man, when you guys find out what it is he told me that fixed this car, I was floored. I mean, it makes total sense. You know what I mean? It's not wizardry or anything like that. It's a logical approach to diagnostics that fixed this car. But I'm gonna shut up. You mind telling the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely threw me for a loop. So, what we see here is the 2010 Explorer Sport Track. Vehicle was recommended to my shop by another shop from a town over in Cape Coral. And they knew it was some kind of an electrical issue or a module issue, and they just kind of wanted to wash their hands of it. So the vehicle showed up, customer concern, no exterior lights, no interior lights, no power windows, no power door locks. And after a quick preliminary, we had communication with everybody but the Smart Junction Box.
So the Smart Junction Box. This is like for those of you that aren't aware, many of the manufacturers have I'll call it a version of this today. Like Honda will refer to this smart fuse box as a multiplex integrated control unit, or a MICU, M-I-C-U. Chrysler does it right with their TIPM, totally integrated power module. Mercedes-Benz with their signal acquisition modules. And let's see, Nissan, what is it? Integ IPDM, intelligent power distribution module.
Yeah.
And all these kind of follow suit. It's the way we network vehicles today. It's easier to have these little smart fuse boxes. It's like a regular fuse box with some logic in it. Perform functions. It's almost like a built-in, almost like a body control module, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And they all have non-serviceable relays to them too, which is kind of unique to those style modules, whether it be a TIPM or a Smart Junction Box. Any of the relays are integrated, they're non-serviceable.
Gotcha. So again, this thing, everything seems to be working good, but you made a discovery. How did you get this thing to work?
So there was a lot of things that didn't work, right? And I knew I had the list from the customer. I knew what the concerns were. This vehicle fired up and ran amazing. It was driven around from out back. It was brought into my bay. And again, I just started checking things that did work, right? I wanted to start chopping that diagnostic tree down. And it's like, okay, I know the things that don't work. I verified that they actually don't work. Now let's see what does work. I had working wiper blades. I had power seats. The heated seats came on. Audio system worked fine. Again, it started and ran great, but I had no exterior lighting. So one of the things that we do when we service vehicles is we pull them in the bay, we beep the horn, right? So I beeped the horn, and I happened to notice the interior lights came on because I had the driver's door open. And I pressed on the horn, and I heard a relay click, from under the dash, and everything just started working. So now I'm laying on the horn, and people are coming over like, do you need me to check your lights? What's the deal? He's just layering the horn. And the more I'm laying on the horn, I'm beeping the horn, I'm like, wow, the headlights are working now, and now the turn signals are working. This is great. So to not upset everybody, I quickly found the horn and unplugged it so that I could continue making everything work, right?
Not the horn relay, but the horn itself,
The
right?
horn itself, I went right under the hood
Gotcha.
and unplugged the horn because I really didn't want to mess with the circuit. Whatever I was doing,
Yeah.
touching the horn, it was fixing stuff. So I was already on the right track.
You, you
Um,
know, I want to cut you off for 2 seconds. You said something that really hit home with me, and I recognize it because I think it's like a diagnostician thing.
Mm.
You referenced you wanted to see things, all the things that didn't work, but also all the things that do work.
Oh, of course.
We can draw so many conclusions if we take that little bit of time to just check things out and see what happens and what doesn't happen. You can start eliminating possibilities. I'm
Yeah,
going to
for
make up
sure.
a scenario. I'm sorry, my phone's ringing there. It's my good buddy Bryn Klein trying to bother me. We'll get back to him later. He's last on the totem pole today. Anyhow, um, you've got, for instance, a power supply that feeds, let's say, the headlights and the horn, but the horn doesn't work. Well, if you can turn on the headlights and they come on, right away it can't be that shared power supply issue. So there's no need to test for that. You know
Right.
what I mean? You can draw a lot of conclusions just being observant. So I love the way you did that. I love that approach.
Yeah. And again, so I kind of isolated that whole deal, and I didn't want to take down that circuit by removing the relay, which I'm not even sure if I looked. There was one or two serviceable relays in the Smart Junction box. I want to say one of them was the accessory delay relay that
Hmm.
was serviceable, and possibly the horn relay, but I'm not 100% on that. So either way, I just unplugged the horn. I didn't want to pull the fuse, anything. I just unplugged the horn from the horn itself under the hood. And then lo and behold, I held the horn down with one arm and I rescanned the vehicle, and I actually had communication with the Smart Junction Box, and that sent me on my next path of okay, now I have a code in here um, for a left rear tail light circuit,
Okay.
a brake light circuit. And I said, well, that's odd. Maybe there's a short back there. There's something going on. First thing I want to do is pop the tail light out real quick. And I noticed that there was no bulb in there.
Ah,
Yeah, so somebody had been in there. So I went to the light cabinet and I grabbed a 3157. I plugged it in and it was on. It was stuck on. The brake light on the left rear was stuck on. Nobody was touching the brakes. No right rear brake light, no third brake light.
just the
So
left rear brake light was on?
just the left rear brake light filament was on, but I still had no parking light filaments, no, unless I was holding the horn down,
Mhm.
everything started to work. So
That's
that kind
crazy.
of told me since the beginning of time, I think, horns work on a ground switch circuit on almost every vehicle. I'm sure there's other vehicles out there that don't use a ground circuit to activate the horn through the steering wheel. But I said to myself, there must be a ground issue here. And I'll be honest, I had already been looking at the vehicle for a little while
Yeah.
before I decided to check what actually did work. I kind of did my preliminary. I tried to do my code scan. I knew that I didn't have communication to the Smart Junction box. I had already pulled some wiring diagrams and looked over some fuses. I located where the Smart Junction box was, which was really buried up above the left front kicker panel under the dash. So
Hmm.
I had a little bit of time invested in this thing before I was like, all right, let me just see what works. And I think when I blew the horn and things started working, it really just pushed me off my path. If I was riding a bike, somebody threw a stick through the wheel and I was off the bike. That was it.
Yo, you get shaken up a bit, but you know what? You re-energize your focus elsewhere. So, I mean, I imagine at this point, you leaning on the horn tipped you off to check out this horn wiring diagram, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So what do
Yep.
we got going on here?
So let me just move our faces out of the way. So you can see where you circled control there.
Yeah.
In this diagram. And I mean, basically by me pressing down the horn switch at the bottom right of the screen, it passing through the clock spring and it's activating this relay. This control here tells me that it's shared, that circuit's shared with other components. So obviously by me pressing the horn, it's activating whether it be other relays or the dead half of the Smart Junction box. Um, Now, me and you had spoke a little bit about that when I reached out for a lifeline and whether or not that control is in there because of the keyless entry system or the factory alarm. I know that a lot of vehicles, when you lock you lock the doors, you double tap the lock button, it'll beep the horn to indicate and let you know that things are locked. That's probably where that control circuit is coming from.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, because that's the only way we're going to sound that horn.
Yeah.
Is by controlling the ground path here to this relay. So this is done with you, I'll call it externally, but the only way for that horn, that feedback to occur is for the Smart Junction Box to provide that ground path. So I do, if you don't mind, Jason, I'm going to jump in here 2 seconds
Yeah.
because you know, guys or ladies too, when you were thinking about stuff, when you were approaching this weird possessed problem, as Jason has been faced with, keep your eyes open. Don't let this stuff intimidate you. When we're analyzing things like diagrams, you know, don't just look at it at face value and say, okay, here's a smart junction box and here's the horns and here's the relay. Look at some of the details. Obviously, this is controlled on the ground side. That's the first thing we have to establish. It's got voltage supply to the switch side and to the control side. But on the control side, we actuate the relay by providing a ground path through the horn switch. But this is what Jason was just providing us with, that he was calling out this control, this item labeled control here. Obviously, the dotted line indicates we're not seeing the whole story, but we do know that this provides an alternate ground path for this horn relay for things like when you chime the, sorry, when you double tap maybe the lock button and energize or initiate the security system. This control will provide an alternate ground path to sound a relay. But what I'm trying to point out here, not only that, this is in fact a smart junction box. It's a computer. And by Jason providing the the ground path through the relay, he is also inadvertently providing a ground path for this control box. So by him providing this ground path and things are starting to work, we should think of this as a potential clue. Could this be a clue? Could this offer us a clue as to what might be wrong with this vehicle? Maybe not pinpoint where the problem is, but what is missing from the equation? We don't know this to be factual yet, but it could be a clue. Is that where your mind went with this, Jason?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, being in the trade for, long enough, like I said, when I hit the horn button and I noticed some things activate in the vehicle, like the interior lights was the biggest clue for me. The interior
Yep.
lights came on and I was like, all right, some things just came back online by me. And I said it to myself, by me applying ground.
Yeah.
Because again, like I said, I know that horn switch circuits, since forever have been a ground switch circuit. So I knew that I applied ground, and for some reason, this smart junction box was smart enough to let that ground path travel through it, obviously through that control circuit, and it brought some things back online. Not only did it bring some things online, it brought everything online. So I knew I was looking at a ground issue,
And
and
that's why you reference this, right?
yes, that slide that you're pulling up right there, I was traveling through the wiring diagrams based on the grounds. I wanted to look at all grounds, and I was flipping through pages, and anything that was related to Smart Junction Box, I started looking at. And this was the first ground that I found. That was C2280B. And I did test this one directly at the connector of the Smart Junction Box. And again, the wiring diagrams don't show you the components that particular ground is controlling. It just says it goes to the smart junction box. I did have a good load tested ground there.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a little rig in my diagnostic kit. I've got a whole wiring kit, and I keep a little 9006 light bulb that's rigged up with some alligator clips that I can quickly load test with, and that's what I used, and I got a good ground out of that.
So
And
what Jason's pointing out here is, I'm going to zoom in again one more time. Here is connector 2280, connector B. So there's 4 or 5 or 6 or however many connectors there are at this junction box. B, the second connector in terminal 28, is the ground path. So this is zoomed in. This is zoomed out, and this leads down to G. I think it's 101. I can't remember. I don't have a good picture of it right here, but Jason did his diligence and he back probed this ground. Now, what he did was, in place of this smart junction box, he took this out of the equation and plugged in a light bulb and supplied the light bulb with voltage. So with the light bulb supplied voltage and it connected to here, which should be a path to ground, the light bulb lit brilliantly. It did what it was supposed to do. And what does that mean to you, Jason?
that's good circuit. That's a
Right,
proven, the
we've
proven
got a
circuit.
complete circuit. So if Jason only used his ohm meter, for instance, the ohmic value, the resistance in that circuit with the ohm meter might indicate a good path to ground. But the moment you try to flow current through it, that ground path becomes not so good. And I'll give you guys a for instance. Many of you have heard this before, but for those of you that are just chiming in, maybe that are new to diagnostics or not yet comfortable with electricity, make sure you get there. If you looked at a strand of wire, a hunk of wire, we'll call it a braided cable that's this long, and it has 100 strands, individual copper strands in it. If I were to measure that 1 foot piece of wire with an ohm meter, it would read a certain value. Okay. If I were to cut 99 strands and only leave one single, almost like one single hair intact, if I made that same measurement with my ohm meter, once again, it would read almost identical. However, try to flow electrical current through that wire, that single strand. It's not gonna get there. It's gonna heat up and melt down. We
Yeah.
call that voltage drop. So that's what Jason was trying to prove. If he saw that this 9006 light bulb, which is that's more like a fog lamp bulb, isn't it? Or a low beam headlamp bulb?
9006. I want to say it's a high beam or a low beam
I
for
Yeah,
GM.
right. A bulb carries a lot of current, it gets hot. If that thing were to have lit dimly and he has a known good power source to it, the only other problem could be the ground side. So he was trying to prove that out. It proved to be okay because since the bulb illuminated properly, it means it had a good source of voltage and a good path to ground. So I agree with that 100%. But here's where I don't even want to say Jason went wrong. I don't think Jason went wrong at all. I think Jason did everything he was supposed to do. However, according to the information he has here, it looks like there is only one ground for this smart junction box. And I hope that makes sense for you guys at home. Isn't that what you were thinking at this point in time, Jason?
Yeah, and it just happened to be the path that I took. I was using all data, and
Yeah.
basically the path that I chose to look were ground circuits, right? So you can kind of search OE wiring diagrams. It gives you the list, and do you have power circuits, relays, switches, things like that. And I went right to the grounds, and I started, maybe 10 or 13 pages. And I just started scrolling through, and anything that was related to SJB, I was going after. I want to say I even checked the grounds to the multifunction switch, just because I know on those Fords, the multifunction switch just does a ton. Communicates with door locks and high beam, low beam. The wipers are in there, and a lot of those things I had and I didn't have. So that was a question for me as well. Now, when I was looking through the wiring diagram, that one jumped out at me. And then when I was able to prove that ground was good, I don't remember finding any other grounds going into the smart junction box listed in those diagrams, basically.
Fair
Um,
enough.
that's kind of when I had to phone a friend. Sometimes when you got a lot of things going on, and like you had explained to me before, being able to step away, not even have a relationship with the vehicle, and you can kind of bounce something off another tech, it really, really helps. This is why I do a lot of networking in the industry, because it's great to have people to reach out to, people that do this stuff every day. And, that's when I reached out to you and was like, hey, man, what did I miss? Why is this thing treating me like this?
Jason, I'll be the first to tell you, not only have I been in that exact position 100 times or more, I can tell you, me sitting at home with a hot cup of coffee in front of the fire in my underwear is a lot easier for me to think than when I'm trying to be a shop foreman at a shop in Florida where it's 95 degrees and you got sweat rolling down the crack of your behind, and you got the phone ringing, you got other technicians depending on you for input, and customers. That's a hard sit. That's truly in the heat of battle. And
Yeah.
it's very, very hard to focus sometimes, especially when you have to think about something not so straightforward like this. So I commend you for reaching out, for someone who is, pardon the pun, grounded, someone at home that's out of the work element, but has access to the same information. What did I say to you? I said, we're going to fix this from the desk, didn't I?
Yeah, yeah, that was I mean
And
that statement, that quote, it's got to be put on a t-shirt at some point or something. Next time I see you at Vision, I'm gonna have a t-shirt with that on it. You said to me, you were like, listen, man, send me the VIN number, but everything that you're telling me and the things that you've already tested, I feel like I should sit down and review some wiring diagrams. This thing's gonna get diagnosed from a desk. And that really made me think, because like you said, I mean, I'm getting pulled 6 different ways from Sunday, and there's a lot of production going on, a lot of vehicles, a lot of people need my attention. I mean, not for nothing, I'm the Corvette guy, and I'm also the diagnostic guy. So I've got all these pretty Corvettes outside waiting for me, but I also have to get through these grueling, module diags and
For
programming and
sure.
all these other events. So it was good to use you as a lifeline. Like it's like who wants to be a millionaire? I called in, I did the phone a friend thing. So
That's great. And you know what? My friends, I'm glad they let me call them friends because I'm the dumbest out of all my friends. Right? All my friends let me, I learn from them all the time. So I truly appreciate having a lifeline. But I want to back up here. So I was able to pull some wiring diagrams that Jason, from the same system Jason was using from ALLDATA, which is a tremendous system to use. One of my go-tos for sure. But again, me being seated at home and not having to work on the fly, I just had the opportunity to approach things from a different angle. So I sought out grounds as well, where Jason went and first found the junction box and worked his way backwards from there. I went to the ground path and worked my way towards the junction box. So I found a couple of different grounds. Now, I'm what I'm showing here, I kind of pieced together some pictures that Jason sent me, along with the location of the picture. Sorry, a location in service information. So G101, we researched it. That's located in the engine compartment, the left-hand side near the front. Well, this would be the passenger side of the vehicle. Down here would be the driver's side of the vehicle. And this is G101 right here. Jason tested this. It's nice and tight. It was nice and clean. And as big as this ground is, this provides a heck of a lot of ground reference to many, many different circuits and components. And it tested okay.
yep.
Again, testing right here.
And another thing too, if you go back to there, you go that slide with the G101, the bottom of the screen, you can see that harness there. I'm not sure if I had sent you a photo, but again, this is a first time customer to my shop, and it had recently had a radiator put in it. And when
Okay.
they bolted that radiator back in, they bolted that harness under the radiator mount, and they squished about a handful of wires that I started by repairing. I mean, this was something that I noticed visually within the first 10 or 15 minutes of this thing being in my bay. So I started by fixing those squashed wires,
Oh,
obviously to no avail. Nothing, it didn't fix anything that was wrong with it, but it was something that I seen. I didn't know if they were completely severed, but they were squashed
gotcha.
enough under the bracket that they needed to be addressed.
So I misspoke. This is the fire. This is not the firewall, the bulkhead. This is
That's the
to the
radius
right.
support.
Yeah, this is the rad support. So to the right would be the front of the vehicle.
Yes.
Back this way would be the firewall. And this
Yes.
is this would be about the driver's side headlight area, give or take, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So this harness you noticed to be pinched where they
Yep.
reassembled the vehicle, and you fixed some obviously damaged wires, but it didn't take care of any of your symptoms.
No, that would have been too easy for sure.
Right? Go figure. So 101 tested good. Went ahead and he found, and we were on the phone for this. You went ahead and checked G300. That's located at the left-hand A pillar,
Yep.
which is right down here. And that
Yep.
tested okay as well.
Yep. And
And when you call
that's closest one to the SJB as well. The SJB is right up in that kicker panel, tucked up under the dash.
right up there, man, what a pain. I've been down that many vehicles. I've been up there. And you know what, God, I'm a tiny guy. You know me. What am I, about 5'7" with hair gel? 170 pounds soaking wet. If anyone's going to fit under a dashboard, it's me, and I hate it. I can't imagine being like, what about our big buddy, guys like Brian Pollock?
Yeah. It was awful, and I'm not a
Six,
I'm not a super big guy either, but I can
yeah,
imagine some
6'6",
some techs
400
in the
pounds.
industry would have maybe had to take the dash out. I guess
Good
to
Lord.
get to this thing.
Yeah, so that's the last place I want to be. I can understand why you didn't check this first.
Yeah.
And then finally, G301, which is just behind the B pillar panel. So you called me back at this point and said, hey, this is what I've got. This justified replacement of the SJB. And if I'm not mistaken, some other didn't if I remember this correctly, did another tech look at this and put an SJB in this? Or did you? I
Yeah,
can't
so
remember.
when this vehicle originally arrived at my shop, it was given to another technician. I didn't really review too much of his diag, but he came to the conclusion, based on checking powers and things like that, that basically the smart junction box was offline and it needs a smart junction box. We did get one. He did put it in, and then
Mhm.
that's when the vehicle was given to me. Was like, hey, you got to program this body control module that I put in the vehicle. And I mean, I trust my guys all the time. I trust my guys. And I plugged it into, I don't even think this was a program. I want to say this was a configure,
Sure.
reset the TPMS thing, some small stuff. So I plugged it in and I didn't even have communication to it.
Gotcha. So
That's
clarify.
that's when that's when my relationship with this vehicle started.
So to clarify for those of you at home listening, especially if you're not familiar, the body control module is the smart junction box on this vehicle, the body control module. It's just a computer that controls body functions like lighting and horns and windows and things like that. So when you heard Jason say body control module, it's not a different component. It's the same one, a smart junction box. Also, I want to reference programming versus configuration. Programming is when you take software, a set of commands, and you dump it into the computer. Configuration is basically saying we've got a computer that could function in multiple vehicles. To configure it mean to tell it, does this thing have a power sunroof? Does it have automatic climate control? Does it have 15-inch tires or does it have 17-inch tires? Things like that,
Yep.
giving it a personality, a fingerprint, if you will.
Yep.
So
And
that's
that's
what
that's
configuration
yep.
is.
And that's what I was going after. That's what I was getting ready to do. And the reason that I knew ahead of time that there was going to be no programming is because these are no longer available new. I mean,
Gotcha.
again, this is things a 2010 Sport Track. It's not available new from any dealer. We always try and go new first. So we found one local that was it was taken out of another Sport Track same year. I already knew that it had an identity. It already had software in it. I figured, he plugs it in. I'll just have to configure it for that particular vehicle.
I gotcha. Makes total sense. So obviously we wouldn't be talking about this if that fixed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got the SJB and it wah, 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 right? It happens. We've all been there. Everybody's been there. That's listening to this. I guarantee it. And don't be just like Jason, don't be ashamed of that. Mistakes happen. If you remember what I told you, Jason didn't make a mistake. He did all the right testing. He just did not have the complete story. He didn't have all the information. So he did his diligence and he checked the ground path. And the one ground path he saw available appeared to be okay. If it
Yeah.
walks like a duck and acts like a duck, it's a duck. What am I getting at? He checked everything this thing needed to function and it had it. Process of elimination means this device was no good. The real story is Jason didn't have all the information. There was missing information. So at this point, we're right back to square one again. This is right before he called me. And maybe you did call me. I can't remember. But at this point, you found out with the light bulb, you found out your brake light was missing. You plugged a new bulb in. And
Mhm.
now the brake light bulb is illuminated at all times. So again, when you were, and I do this with drivability a lot. So many people will call me and say, this car's doing this and it's doing this and it's also doing this. And it's also misfiring. Okay, stop right there. The misfire is obvious. We can see it. We can feel it. We can see data to reflect the misfire. Let's chase the misfire. Let's chase that symptom. If we chase that symptom and find the root cause of that symptom, it's likely we're going to solve the other issues. Likely, not
Yeah.
guaranteed. So
Yep.
what I'm getting at is Jason's got multiple issues. He's got communication problems, meaning he's trying to talk with this smart junction box. And the smart junction box, other devices on the vehicle are trying to talk to the smart junction box. And it's not available. Is it easier? We've also got lighting issues, a brake light that's on at all times. We can fix the problem by looking at the horn, by activating the horn. In my eyes, looking at those 3 bullet points right there, the light bulb is on at all times. You don't have to do anything to make it happen. It doesn't make any noise. It's obvious. You can see it from across the shop. To me, that's a real easy symptom to chase. I hope that makes sense. By chasing the light bulb issue, Jason's likely going to find the root cause of that and solve all the other seemingly possessed characteristics that this truck's exhibiting. So pick the one in my eyes that's most efficient, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what you did, Jason. Then you were led here. What does this wiring diagram tell us here? Let me zoom in on this a little bit. So this is our smart junction box. This is our left rear lamp, and this is the one that's illuminated at all times, right?
That's right.
But none of the other ones are, right?
Nope.
So we've got let's just look at the brake bulb only. This is 2 filaments here, one for the lighting and one for the brake bulb, 2 different size filaments. The one's going to glow really bright, and that's the one that's lit. Well, this is always grounded. This ground path is shared with the ground path for the right rear, which is functioning normally.
When the horn's
And
pressed.
with the horn pressed, of course.
Only with the horn
Uh,
pressed.
Only with the horn pressed.
Right.
Our smart junction box has an HSD, which stands for high side driver, meaning it sends voltage out. It sends current flow out via voltage supply to this light bulb. It does the same thing. There's another high side driver here. So if this bulb is working normally with the horn depressed and this one is not, it already has it has a common ground path. That can't be it by process of elimination. We are stuck with the problem being a high side driver. So once again, we are right back to this thing needs a smart junction box. You already tested the grounds. So
Yeah.
this is the point where Jason reached out to me. Jason called me on the phone. He told me everything that you and I were just discussing, Jason. And didn't I say it sounds like a ground issue, like backfeeding?
Yeah.
And this is where you said, dude, I already checked the grounds.
Yep.
And that's when I said, tell you what, let me hang up the phone. Did I call you back in 2 minutes? No. I
Nope.
was gone for at least an hour. I was sitting
Yeah.
down. I went through pages and pages of information, and I was making logical, I was triangulating where the fault was based upon the symptoms you told me. And that's when I said, look, don't sweat it. We're going to figure this out from the desk. I actually told you to go do something else
Yeah.
while I work on this because I
Yeah.
didn't know how long I was going to be. So for those of you that are watching that think I'm some kind of wizard or Jason or anybody else that cares to share these awesome stories with me, these tales, these wrench tales with me, none of us are wizards. And we are no smarter than you are. Um, do we have experience? Yeah. Some of it is getting our butts handed to us. And that's some of the best learning you can do is when you really get your ass kicked, pardon my French.
That's the
But I mean,
training you never forget.
it absolutely is. So we can sit through all the classes we want, fellas and ladies. We could read all the books we want. We could watch all the YouTube videos we want, even from reputable sources. But until you start applying these techniques, learning from others, but also learning from your own mistakes, um, this is where things really start to sink in. So again, I just want to reiterate, when I told Jason I was going to give him my input, he wasn't lazy in passing it off to me. He wanted me to find where did he go wrong? He's acknowledging he's missing something and he doesn't know what it is. And I've been down that road too many times. Um, I've had friends all over the country that have bailed me out in situations like this. I didn't want them to do it for me. I wanted them to find my mistake so I could learn from it. So again, I left Jason with that thought for probably an hour. It might have been more, but I needed that time to do my research. And again, having not being in the heat of battle and being a fresh pair of eyes where I'm not tainted by anybody else's, workings on this vehicle, I had a clean path to start from. So I did the same thing Jason did. I researched the same grounds Jason found G101, G300, and G301 right here. If you were to zoom in here, it labels the connectors. C2280B, terminal 28 is this one right here, the one that Jason load test, the only one that Jason found. However, there are two more that provide supplemental grounds for the smart junction box. That would be found in terminal number 2 of connector 2280A, which is right here, and terminal number 22 of connector number 2280E. So these are the two. And on top of that, we have to test at the junction box. Why is that? Because if Jason tests here, again, we're leaving the circuit intact. He's going to back probe this and maybe load test it. He would be bypassing this wire. So for instance, if I were to come in here and draw a big ball of green snot right here, that'll represent corrosion. If Jason's testing right here, the path to ground is good, his light bulb is going to illuminate all day long. However, if he tests right here, for instance, that current flow has to flow through this ball of snot, and it's going to use up some of the voltage, create what we call a voltage drop. So not only is the test we're performing of importance, it's where we carry out that test. That's what we have to keep in mind always. We ought to understand the limitations of the test we're performing. Uh-oh, I just lost my cursor. There we go. Bear with
And
me one
not
second.
only, oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Go for
No,
it.
and not only did I have to load test those circuits, they have to be load tested, right? But we can
For
check
sure.
the meter, we can, see if it lights up a little LED ground test light that we have or something. But load testing it is super important, and I have to make sure that I don't shy away from ever doing that, because I'm the guy in the shop that has to make sure everybody else is doing that. I bought all my Texas sealed beam and said, this is why. I even did the copper strands of wire thing. I said, look, I mean, it tests out, it ohms out, it looks great, but when you try and carry a load through that piece of broken wire, it's just not going to work. So I have to make sure that I'm doing it the way I want my guys to do it. So I did go in there and started chipping away. And if you look, the top one there, the C2280B, that was the ground that I had tested, like you said, at the module, but the wiring diagram I was looking at only showed me that ground.
Right.
So being able to find this particular diagram in the beginning probably would have saved me some time. It might have saved me from using a lifeline. But again, that's why, when you're not, you didn't have anything to do with this vehicle, you were thousands of miles away, and you were able to just kind of take the VIN number, look the vehicle up, and just kind of pick through some wiring diagrams when you're not in a shop atmosphere. And, I want to say that I think you sent me this photo through text or chats or something. And I was like, man, I just pulled this same diagram up
Yeah.
as you sent it to me. And I said, man, I missed it. I feel like we're going to find our problem here, whether or not we do find the problem with one of these grounds. I was definitely looking at a correct, but not I was looking at a correct wiring diagram, but I didn't have the whole picture.
I just noticed something, Jason, and I'm going to have to go back and look at this because I didn't notice it before. Yours is a sport track, and you looked this up. I wonder if the diagram you referenced was for something like sport track only. Who knows? I have no
Yeah,
idea.
that previous slide that showed that ground that I was looking at, it was highlighted sport track smart junction box.
Yeah. Very good.
There's a couple back there. I think you might have screen shared that one, maybe.
Oh, this one here.
Yes. So if
Let's
you
let's
see the box that's highlighted, it says Sport Track Smart Junction Box.
You're right. There you go. So maybe that's where you were hung up. Again, you didn't do anything wrong. You just got tunnel vision from the fact that it's a smart track.
Yeah.
So you know what's great though? Tell me if I'm wrong. When we uncovered this, didn't you get like a breath of fresh air, like you were re-energized, going, bang, we're gonna find it now?
Absolutely.
I love that feeling. It's almost like,
I think we had an answer within a couple of minutes.
yeah, you were right on top of that. And that's when you called me and you sent me this,
Yep.
right? You sent me a picture from your phone. This is right from your phone. And
Yep.
you said, son of a gun, as I'm sending you this, you sent me the same exact look. It's the same picture. Look at all these continuations in the three grounds. And I even circled it very, very much like you did.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
so I mean, we were definitely on the same page. You uncovered it about the same time I did from 1,000 miles away. And you got right on track. But I love that feeling. Is like adrenaline kicks in again. You're like, you got a new sense of direction. You got a new path to follow, and you just know you're going to find your problem.
Yeah. And we diagnose a lot of stuff and we fix a lot of stuff through the day to day. And some of the stuff is a little easier than others.
Uh-huh.
This one really was something, because I mean, I'll tell you, when I beeped the horn when I brought this thing in, it just changed everything about what I was thinking about. I'm like, oh Jesus, now everything works because I'm blowing the horn. And then when I was able to make the horn contact and I knew that I had communication, now I had a code for a left rear brake light, and I investigated that and there was no bulb. And when I put the bulb in, I'm like, the bulb's stuck on. I'm like, gee, I felt like it just kept getting worse. I was digging myself into this hole where I felt like I had a path in the beginning, but then I'm like, what's happening? That's where the whole possessed thing comes from, right?
For sure. And from the outside looking in, we hear that terminology all the time, especially from the layperson, from the customers who truly don't understand. This car is possessed. It's going to be recalled. I know it. This car is possessed. There's something wrong with it. It's haunted. When we start to see things from a scientific perspective, everything can be explained, and we just got to find those clues that lead us, down that path towards the problem.
Yeah. And
So,
once we did
Yeah.
find that ground, I think it really kind of became apparent when we started looking at the control side of that horn relay and some of the other systems that are integrated together, as far as like locking and unlocking the doors and sounding the horn when the doors lock. And that stuff really started, the logic behind that started to really make sense with that control.
So right here, yeah, realizing that this is basically a path to ground, although it's not intended. I mean, I'm sure we've crossed electronics that should never have been, the gates have never should have been crossed, like through diodes and things like that, to make its way there. And I'm
Yeah.
sure long term it may have done damage to that smart junction box. Who knows? Depending on
Maybe.
how much current actually passed through the wrong direction through this ground path.
Yeah. And
But
it
who knows?
brings up other questions too, Brandon. Like, when I flash the high beams, why doesn't the horn beep? Or when I, things like that. If it's sharing a control, obviously there's some, that's why they call it a smart junction box. It gets
Yep.
more than I do to know what's going on.
And I'll tell you what, there's a saying I learned years ago from a good friend of mine, John Anello, the Auto Tech on Wheels, one of the original mobile guys. Been doing about 35 years now, I think. He had a saying when it comes to describing what you just did regarding turning on the high beams and now that horn doesn't work. The big guy gets the pie. So the one that carries the most current is going to rob that ground circuit of the most voltage drop, if you will. And whatever's left over, everyone else has to share. So you turn on the high beams, now the horn doesn't work. You know,
Yeah.
exact same thing.
Yeah.
So how did you prove this out? So you went down to this ground. Which one is it?
So
Can't remember.
I started with the
Bottom one.
2280 B at the top, which I knew I had already tested. Once I looked at this diagram, I said, okay, C2280B, I know that connector. I was already in there. I back probed it. I load tested it. That's a good ground. I
Yep.
moved down to the next one, C2280A, same deal. Load tested that. Nice bright light. No issues on that circuit. And then 2280E, knowing that it was the last one, before I went ahead and put my light bulb in there, I just tapped it with the power probe and I had nothing. So I said, all right, let's load test it. Nothing, open circuit. Um, Now, the way this harness runs from that is a G101 ground, which means that's the ground behind the driver's headlight that we were looking at, that's right next to the battery. Now, keep in mind where the smart junction box is. It's in the left front kicker panel, right next to the driver's left foot.
Gotcha.
Ground is also on the driver's side, but in the engine bay behind the headlight. That ground travels all the way across the radiator support, across
This
the
way.
passenger inner fender well, into
Hmm.
the firewall, and then across the inside of the dash down to the smart junction box.
Wow. Okay. Got a long way to go.
It was a huge, because why? I mean, why not make it 5 times longer than it needs to be? It's typical manufacturer thing, right? So I was able to prove out that it was 100% broken somewhere in the dash. I could have started taking the dash apart, but I mean, I had G301 was right there, right below the smart junction box. So I did a quick little test. I supplied ground to that circuit, and everything came back online.
So let me do this. Hold on one second. Let's go back to this. So here's 301.
Oh, it's
Here's 300.
300, right? It was 300. I'm sorry.
Here's 300, and you jumped it to where?
I jumped it to G300. That bolt right there that holds the G300
Yeah.
grounds.
So right there, he jumped it to a good ground path. And guess what? The sun came out, the birds started chirping, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? That is I call that a bypass test. You know, it's one thing for Jason to walk up to the service advisor and go, "Hey, boss man, we got a broken wire in the dashboard. I need permission to take the dash out so I can find the broken wire so I can fix it." I got two problems with that. One, if you're wrong, right? It happens.
Yeah.
If you're wrong, that's an expensive oops. Two, it takes time. And three, what if you take the vehicle apart? I mean, the chances happen are slim to none, but I've been down this path before. You take the vehicle apart, you got this beautiful presentation of the broken wire, and the customer goes, "Well, I don't want to invest the money in fixing it." Oh God, who's going to pay for this dash to come out? Well, what you just did was two things. One, you proved by doing this bypass test, you didn't have to take anything apart. Two, you prove that if and when you do take the car apart, that when you fix what you think the problem is, the car is going to work. You just proved it by supplementing a ground path. So you're proving it worked and you don't have to take anything apart. If the customer says, never mind, no problem. It took you 2 seconds to jump it.
Yep.
If the car says, if the customer says, yeah, I want to fix it, great. Then you get paid to take it apart. So
Yeah.
I call that a bypass test. I think it's brilliant. I think it's the best way to do things, the most efficient way.
Yep. And,
Um,
again, when this vehicle first arrived, and I made the educated decision to just go ahead and make a new ground and put it right to G300. And the reason behind that is the way we like to do things at my shop is we stand behind our diagnostics. We charge for our diagnostics. We're very big and open and upfront with the customer, about that diagnostic charge. And we kind of don't back down off of that. So when, this vehicle was given to my technician and he did his diagnostic and we sold that customer a Smart Junction Box, and our word is our bond with our customers. And we said, we're going to put a Smart Junction Box in this thing. We're going to get it reprogrammed and we're going to get you on your way. So at that point, when the vehicle wasn't fixed, regardless of what it took to fix it, it was going to be on the house at this point. The vehicle was going to leave fixed based on the conversation that, we had already had with that customer. It was unfortunate that it was like that, but even if it wasn't that case, I mean, let's be honest, it's a 2010 Ford Explorer Sport Track. Some of these things are only still alive in Florida because they haven't rotted away yet. So taking the dash out to find the broken wire, that's probably not something I would even recommend to the customer. I probably would have just recommended him to jump it to the closest G300 ground and call it a fix.
well, here's the thing: what people don't realize, again, where I draw the line as far as doing, I'll call it a shortcut repair. I'm not saying it's the wrong repair. I'm saying a shorter version of the question I have to answer is this: am I re-engineering the circuit? I'm going to say no. So let me go back to a cleaner picture here. Let's go to this one, just because there's no chicken scratch on it. For instance, we found a problem. Oops, we found a problem right here. Okay. For you, let me turn off my cursor again. Sorry. Oh, my ink disappeared. That's weird. Anyhow, oop, I lost my curve. When you turn your pen on, my nice pretty arrow disappears. Uh-oh. There, oop,
Found it.
there it is, right there. All right, let's get rid of the ink. Sorry about that, everybody. So we have our problem right here. I'm going to go back and turn my pen off again so I can see my cursor. No? There we go. We have a problem right here. For Jason to take this dash apart just so he can find where this wire is severed and repair it, we'll call that the proper repair. However, if Jason leaves this as is and provides a ground path supplemental to what is here, you are not re-engineering the circuit. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's still being provided a path to ground. If you ran this to that, for instance, and this now shared the same ground path as this wire here, you are re-engineering the circuit, and that it would not be proper because this wire, this gauge, this thickness of this wire is designed to carry a certain amount of current. And by you combining one ground path with this one, you're forcing it to carry more load than it's designed to handle. Is it going to be a problem? Maybe not. But you can't guarantee that because you're not an engineer. So by you just providing a ground path, a supplemental one, as long as it's clean and a path to ground, you are not re-engineering the circuit. And in that, if that's the case, I will say that that is not an improper repair. I see nothing wrong with what you did.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely don't feel it was an improper repair. I think it was a corner cut to save some time, possibly save at this point the shop some production time and some money because again, this wasn't, this whole diagnostic thing and the broken wire. This was the customer was under the impression that the Smart Junction Box was going to fix it. We kept him well informed that it did not repair it, but we were going to get to the bottom of it. And we did end up, taking care of it. Now, one other thing I do want to mention is obviously that ground that runs from the G101 all the way across the radiator support, back into the firewall, across the inside of the dashboard, somewhere that harness is either kinked or chafed. Now, the things that keep me up at night are, should I have found it? Are there other wires that are clustered together in that harness that could also be chafing. They could also be fatigued or bent, and and maybe about to break. That's one question that I do have. Sometimes I wish I would have found where the problem area was to make sure that there was no other wires in that harness that were affected the same way.
And you know something that may have been a question for the customer, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer. We can fix your vehicle the way you did, or for an additional 12 hours, or however much labor was involved in not only removing the dashboard, but now splitting the wire harness and potentially making 15 to 20 or more wire repairs. Sir, do you want to wait until a problem surfaces, if it ever surfaces at all? Or do you want to invest the 10 hours of labor plus materials to nip it in the bud right now? And if the customer decided they want to pull the dashboard, you would get paid to do that.
Yeah.
So do me a favor, if you wouldn't mind, Jason, can you recap a little bit on this whole story, like what you learned from it, and why you were a more valuable technician after this thing than you were before, a more experienced technician, diagnostician.
Well, in your summary, right? So I'm weighing the clues, and one of the biggest things was not only did I have the list of things that were wrong with the vehicle, but I think what tremendously helped me was making sure I knew what did work. By me going through that list of like, all right, what actually do I have? Do I have wipers? Yep, I got wipers. Does the windshield washer spray? They sprayed. The power seats are still working. When I hit this actually was optioned pretty nicely. It had heated seats. So the heated seat, light came on. So I was really just kind of going through what did work. I knew all the things that didn't work. I really wanted to get a list of things that I did have so that I could kind of get those off of my list of worries, right? Because we have to, like you had said, we have a list of things that we have that are issues here. Let's just pick one and go after it. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going after something that wasn't a problem. And so by blowing the horn is just like let's see if this works. That kind of put me on a different path that I thought I was going to be on. So that was a little bit confusing, but again, I'm glad I checked it because ultimately it helped me fix the vehicle.
Awesome.
And then the logic, following the logical path too. And like I said in the beginning, I could probably think of one vehicle off the top of my head that doesn't use a ground to activate the horn. So knowing that when I'm pressing the horn, I'm introducing a ground to the coil side of the relay, and it's activating the horn relay. The horn's blowing, but it's doing something else inside that smart junction box. It's bringing other things back online. I noticed the interior lights come on, like I had said, and now I'm testing other stuff. And like we had talked about in the beginning, I'm ticking off some of the guys in the shop because I just keep blaring the horn. So I went ahead and disconnected the horn, and I just held it down. I held the horn button down, and I had my scan tool in the vehicle already. And lo and behold, I had communication. So that really helped me. That showed me that I had a ground problem. That's what made me pull the wiring diagram and start looking for grounds and anything related to the smart junction box. I wanted to check all those grounds.
Love it. So you pulled the wiring diagrams. I mean, before you even touch the vehicle any further, it gives you a path to follow, right? It gives you a lay of the land, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
How the circuits are laid out in the car and how these components or these systems intertwine. I love that. And you know what? I love the fact that you introduced a load test, an actual load test, because I can tell you, I do technical support over the phone pretty much for a living. And many people reach out to me, and I've said most of the people I deal with now are beyond this. But early on, I'd get people that would call and say, I'd ask them, "Did you check the grounds?" They said, "Yeah, they're good." Good doesn't mean anything. Do they look good? Did you grab a hold of them and shake them and they don't move, so that means they're good? But you've proven they were good with a load test. That's
Yeah.
something factual, something tangible,
Yeah.
not an opinion.
Not
I love
only
it.
is that, it's constantly reiterated in training. I mean, the guys that know that go to training, it's like load test, load test, load test. You've been hearing these guys that have been in the trade for 50 years, and they still use the same sealed beam headlight that's still in the cardboard box. They stuffed a couple of leads in it, and they can see the thing lighten up from the other end of the shop when they're doing a test. one of very early on in my career, I was reading service information, and it gave me a threshold. You're going to own this circuit basically, and if it's within, if it's under x amount of ohms or 5 ohms or whatever, that circuit's good. Well, it turns out that I did that test, and that test told me that my fuel tank pressure sensor was fine and my wiring was fine, and I needed an ECM. And I got burned because I didn't know what a load test was way back when. I did the ohm test, just like the service information told me to do, and it was within spec. And we shotgunned, for lack of a better term, an ECM in this thing, and it ended up being a broken wire. A severely fatigued wire with greenitis and corrosion, and but I followed that path, and that was the time that I learned. I learned way back when that resistance testing and load testing are just two different countries.
Yeah, static versus dynamic. It's just, it's somebody I kind of compare it to somebody who may have a heart condition. For me to sit here, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to pretend to be, but so pardon my ignorance, but for me to take a stethoscope and listen to your heart versus put you on a treadmill and wait for you to keel over so I can revive you, what's the real test, right?
Right.
Obviously, if I can hear with the stethoscope you have a heart problem, you have a heart problem. But just because I don't hear it doesn't mean you don't have one. If I test a suspect circuit with an ohm meter and it tests bad, it's bad. But if it tests good, it doesn't mean, that's what I mean by consider test limitations. It doesn't mean it's good. So
Yes.
I agree with
Yep.
you on that load test.
Yep.
And last but not least, proving that fault, man. Oh my God, that is so powerful. Jumping that and seeing the birds come out chirping and the sun shining. You know what I mean?
It was good. It was
That's the
good.
best feeling in the world. It's fixed without being fixed.
Yeah. Yep. And
Okay.
in the end, I mean, it was really good. Not only did I get to reach out to you, and basically I got to say, "Hey guys, I just reached out to this celebrity tech I know, and he totally fixed this thing over the phone
Yeah.
for us," right? But it was a good learning experience. I was able to kind of sit down with the technician that originally looked at the vehicle in my shop, and we really went over stuff, and he was really fixated on checking the powers and load testing the powers that turn
Mhm.
that smart junction box on. And he wasn't wrong. I did end up reviewing his diag, and we talked a lot about it. And he just didn't check and load test grounds, and he kind of missed that side of it. But I still feel like he was on a good path.
Mhm.
Maybe
Forgot
if
the
he
other
had
kid.
reached out to me for a lifeline, we could have solved it together. But in the end, it didn't matter because the vehicle got fixed. I feel like everybody learned something. And it just
Sure.
kind of shows that we're still human. I mean, we're a pretty high volume, high production shop, and sometimes these things happen. You get some that slip through the cracks. You got some that are a little bit more difficult than others. Um,
Mhm.
you know,
I I got to ask you. So, just I wasn't sure if I heard you correctly. Were you able to review your findings with the original technician of your shop, and did
yes,
he in fact understand?
absolutely,
Perfect. I love it.
absolutely, yep.
That's the end of a great story right there.
It
That's the
was
best
very
part
good.
when you see those light bulbs going off.
Yeah,
Well, I got to tell you, dude, tremendously impressive. I love his stuff, and you made me think. You know what I mean? I love it. At certain times I get phone calls, and I know when my phone rings, I go, "Oh God, this isn't going to be easy." You know what I mean?
yeah.
So when people reach out, if they're not saying hello, they always say hello. If it's not only hello, there's certain names I see on my phone, and I go, "Oh boy, let me roll my sleeves up."
And it wasn't. I didn't send you an in-cylinder pressure waveform for you to review either, right? This was no trick questions. This was real world stuff, man.
No. Well, listen, this was a tremendous story. I know a bunch of people are going to have plenty to say about it when this goes to YouTube. So I urge all you at home that are watching this, whether you're new to the trade or new to diagnostics, or you learned something from this video because you're new to electricity, you like Jason's techniques and his approach. I urge you to chime in with your comments because if you're thinking it, many other people are thinking it, and I want a chance to respond. I wanted to give Jason an opportunity to respond because, again, none of us are born with these skills. It's something that's developed over time. Much of it has to do with committing to lifelong training, going to class and reading books and following along and learning, even on the job or after work. Sometimes you got to put in burn the midnight oil to learn these techniques on your own so you can perform at work. But when you make the commitment to do that and you purchase the tools that are going to show you whether components of systems are functioning correctly or not, once you start implementing these testing techniques, you're going to become a very, very powerful diagnostic weapon. Not only are you going to be more efficient and likely have more money in your wallet, but you're going to become a better performer at work. And what's most important for me, for you guys, for you ladies too, is the confidence you get when you start to obtain some of these qualities, these testing techniques, and these tools, these abilities. When your confidence goes through the roof, work becomes fun again. You don't go to work with a knot in your stomach. You go to work eager and excited and rejuvenated. Do you agree with me, Jason?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Good.
I agree with you, especially with the amount of confidence that you can carry around knowing, what you're capable of with the right training and the right people in your corner. I mean, I get to wear that hat at the shop most of the time. I mean, these guys didn't see me sweating in the corner calling Brandon for a lifeline, right? They were just like, oh, he's the man. He's totally going to figure this out because that's what they expect of me. But I mean, we're all human. I'm really glad that I have the training that I have. I go to the events that I go to and I network with the people, and I'm able to put, a good conversation with some of these names that I've just been friends with on Facebook for years. I mean, this stuff is really invaluable, knowing other people and even having technicians local in your area that you can bounce ideas off of is just really great.
You don't mind, Jason, tell us real quick about FAST, will you?
So something that I put together, it's FASTT. It's Florida Automotive Service and Technician Training. We're thinking about changing the name to Free Automotive Service and Technician Training because we're 4 states wide now. Basically, what I do is as a shop, I like to host training events in-house. And basically, the thing behind FAST is getting the shop owner, the technicians, and the trainers together. And we should be able to host these events at our shop. And the more shops in your area, your county, your area code, however you guys are set up, the more shops you can get on board with this, the more training you can provide for your techs and local techs in your area. The more training I can provide in my area to other techs that don't just work at my shop, but other shops in my area. If I can help bring those technicians up, rising tide rises all ships. And so if I can try and help out the industry in my area and they can expand a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further, that's just more training for my technicians, and it helps educate the customers for the surrounding areas. They know what our value is. They know that we charge a diagnostic fee, and they really see the difference. So
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, you ought to be proud of that. I know you are. You heard it from the man himself, Jason. Guys, get yourself to training.
absolutely.
These skills, these techniques you don't just absorb them through osmosis. You got to learn and you got to practice. Dude, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
That
Thank you for having me on.
phenomenal. Absolutely my pleasure, guys. Jason LaBonte, legendary automotive truck service in Fort Myers, Florida. If you're in the area, stop by, check it out. Reach out, shake hands, say hi to each other. You know what I mean? Network. And again, thanks a million for joining me. All of you at home, thanks for watching. This is the 3rd episode of Wrench Tales, and I'm very excited for the next one. So make sure you tune in. Thanks a lot. We'll catch you next time.